Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Crime Family. This week, I'm going to be telling you the story of Asha Degree, a 9-year-old girl who vanished under very strange circumstances back in North Carolina in 2000. It remains a missing persons case to this day, and the FBI has actively been receiving tips and updating the public on the developments, with new information coming to light as recently as November 2020. Her disappearance will stump even the biggest true crime fans and leave many more questions than it does answers. Thank you for joining us. So, the Asha Degree case was actually one that I wasn't really aware of before this past week, actually. I was going through a bunch of different cases to prepare for the episode and to find a case that I wanted to talk about. I just kind of stumbled upon this one, and the details and the mystery surrounding it had me so perplexed that I knew that it was one that we had to talk about. So it doesn't actually fit into the theme of this podcast, but I think, every now and then we can venture off the beaten path if we choose, just because this is a case that is worth covering, I think, even if it doesn't really fit into the theme. So, it's our podcast. We can do what we want. So have either of you heard about this case at all?
I have, yes. I've heard another podcast episode about it, but that was a while ago, so I don't really know all the details still.
The name sounds familiar, but I don't think I know anything about this case.
So yeah, the case happened back in February of 2000, and the Degree family was actually just a pretty typical American family living in Shelby, North Carolina, at the time of the disappearance. On February 12th, Asha, who was the 9-year-old member of the family, played in a basketball game at her school, and after a very close, hard-fought game, her team lost. I think it was by 1 point or something. Asha's mother, Aquila, said that Asha was very upset over the loss. Just a typical 9-year-old. She was very competitive. She wanted to win, and it was so close that she said that it did bother Asha for the whole day and into the next day. But she says by the next day, when the family had gone to church and everything like that, she seemed to have forgotten about the disappointing loss and had kind of moved on to the next thing, as 9-year-olds do. And on the night of February 13th, there was a power outage in the Degree family's neighborhood around 8:30 p.m. after a car ran into a utility pole, and the power was out for almost 4 hours. It eventually came back at around 12:30 a.m. that night. Aquila had wanted to give her children a bath that night before they went off to bed, but because of the power outage, she just put them to bed a little earlier and planned to bathe them early the next morning before school. Harold, who is Asha's dad, checked on the kids around the time that the power came back on at around 12:30 a.m. Just peeked in their room, everything was fine, and then again at 2:30 a.m. right before he went to bed. So when he checked on them at these times and at 12:30 and 2:30, everything seemed fine, and then he went off to bed. Reportedly, O'Brien, which was Asha's brother, heard Asha's bed squeak during the night, but he thought it was probably just her, switching positions in her sleep or something, so didn't really think anything of it, wasn't too concerned about it. But early the next morning, which actually happened to be February 14th, so Valentine's Day, and it was also Aquila and Harold's wedding anniversary. So Aquila went into the kids' bedrooms to wake them up at around 6 a.m. I've seen different times posted online, like some say 5:45, some say 6:15, 6:30, but let's just say around 6, or between 6 and 6:30. So she went into their room to wake them up, and Asha's brother O'Brien was in his bed, but Aquila was alarmed when Asha was not in her bed or anywhere else in the house. She checked everywhere in the house. She also went and checked inside the cars out in the driveway, maybe if she had gone in there, but she wasn't there. And after this, Harold suggested that maybe they call some family members who lived across the street, just in the event that Asha maybe went over there during the night for some reason. But they called the family members across the street. She wasn't there. So this is when they were extremely alarmed and panicking. And Aquila said she, at one point, was running down the street, screaming Asha's name. So eventually the entire, block heard or was aware of what was happening because they could hear her outside screaming Aisha's name. So she immediately called the police after this to declare Aisha a missing person, and the call was made at 6:39 a.m. So immediately after the police were called that morning, they cordoned off the house for the investigation, but there was no sign of forced entry into the home. All the doors were locked. Aisha's mother said in an interview with The Jet that the police had even brought in a canine unit that day, but they couldn't track Aisha's scent at all. They could only pick up Aquila's scent in the home. She also says that the police were initially looking at her and Harold as possibly being involved, no forced entry, so that's kind of a red flag, and I think it's natural for parents to be kind of looked at least early on, unless there's some evidence to point away from them. So the clues that came up and kind of pointed away from the parents came in from two motorists who claimed that they saw Aisha, or someone who was matching Aisha's description, around 4 a.m. that morning walking south on Highway 18, about a mile from the family home. She seemed to be alone at this time. Now, Aisha was a 9-year-old girl walking alone at 4 a.m. on the side of a highway, so very odd right off the bat. And one of the motorists claims that he had turned around and went back because obviously it was very strange to see this little girl walking by herself at 4 a.m. on the side of the highway. Plus, the weather was terrible that morning. It was raining really hard, it was very windy, and it was a thunderstorm, so it's like horrible weather for someone to be walking outside just in general, let alone a 9-year-old girl by herself at 4 a.m. The motorist actually circled back around a few times and was kind of just like going back and forth, just trying to get a grip on the situation, see and he was obviously concerned, but he said that Aisha fled into the woods upon seeing the vehicle approaching a few times, and he saw her go off into the woods that were right there, and that was the last physical sighting of Aisha that has ever been reported. So that was her last known location. So the thought of a 9-year-old girl leaving her home in the middle of the night during a storm is very odd. And her parents say that she was, like I said before, she was quite upset about losing a basketball game the previous day. And it was maybe she was so angry and upset that she just kind of wanted to get away for a bit or something. That was kind of all that they could think of because everything was otherwise normal. But could this really be enough to propel her to just get up and walk away? So very perplexing, and it wasn't a typical runaway child case because obviously she was only 9 years old, and some members of law enforcement and the FBI say that typically the age for a runaway would start at around 12. That's kind of the youngest that you would see a teen runaway. They're mostly teens who would just run, teen angst, would get fed up with their home situation, flee. So to have a 9-year-old kind of be a runaway is very, very odd. And also Aisha had a very good home life. She was doing really well in school and everything like that, so it seemed like she had a really good life. So for her to be wanting to run away from that seemed very odd as well. Do you guys have any initial thoughts before I get further into it?
I'm just trying to wrap my head around about the 9-year-old on the highway. This right off the get-go, this case is just strange to me, how someone can just disappear from their bedroom without anybody hearing them.
And there's a very small window of time. We know that her dad had checked on the kids at 2:30 at the latest, or around 2:30, and when she went into the room, at 6 a.m., less than 4 hours later, she's gone. So it's obviously somewhere in that window. There's no forced entry, so obviously she had to have walked out of the house of her own will, or somebody... or there wasn't somebody who broke into the house and abducted her or something like that. And also she's walking along the side of the road at 4 a.m. So she wasn't with anybody at this time, or at least that they know of. The motorist didn't say that there was anybody with her. So it seemed like she just kind of got up on her own and walked out of the house, which is weird. So it was a few days after her initial disappearance when her family realized that some of her favorite clothing items were missing from the home, which included a pair of blue jeans with a red stripe down the side. Her book bag was also missing, and it's been reported in some other articles that she had taken a small little purse that she had with Tweety Bird on it, and also her house key with her. So she had her key. It's possible she walked out and locked the door behind her. After the police got involved right away on that day, and they started to do an initial investigation, and shortly after her disappearance, it was only a couple of days after, there was actually a break in the case, or a lead at least, after there were some candy wrappers and some hair bows with Mickey Mouse on them that belonged to Aisha that were found in a shed nearby where Aisha was last seen along Highway 18. So it's allegedly, it was a shed that kind of part of a business. There was like that was kind of in that area. So the owner of the shed lived like in a house that was nearby that. So it was kind of close to where she was last seen. And apparently the candy was from some treat bags that had been given to the children at the basketball game that she had attended on the previous Saturday. So along with the wrappers and the hair bows that her family did confirm belonged to her, there was also a pencil and a marker that was found. The pencil reportedly had Atlanta written on it, and this was actually where the family had gone on a trip not long before the disappearance, so it's likely that that was also hers as well. There was also something very strange that was found in the shed along with the other items, and there was a picture of another little girl that wasn't Asha, and it was just found in the shed along with these items. So police were unable to identify who the child in the photo was. And Asha's family didn't know who the child was at all. But like the question is, like, what is this photo doing in the shed alongside the other items that reportedly belonged to Asha? So the questions were, could it be another possible victim of the person who may have done something to Asha? If there was someone who did something, could this have been another victim of that person? And for some reason, there was a photo that was like dropped in the shed at some point. The only thing that was a little bit odd was the photo is actually not mentioned in some more recent update videos that were actually put out on the FBI's website. So they do there's a 5-minute video that kind of recap like the main pieces of the case just to kind of keep it updated and the public's interest on the case, but they don't mention anything about this photo of this girl. So I'm not sure if maybe they did identify the girl and it was totally unrelated to the case, so they just didn't include it, or maybe if it is connected and they're just keeping that information close to the vest because of the ongoing investigation. So I don't really know where that stands. Like, it might not be related at all, if that's why they didn't include it. So I don't really know what to make of it, but it's just weird. Like, nobody who knew Asha or nobody in the community, no one at the school knew who this person was in the photo. So it was somebody from outside the community, outside the town, which is really odd and very weird that like you would have Asha's belongings in the shed along with this picture of this other little girl. So it was very eerie. Like when I saw that part of the case, I don't know. It was just like super weird to me. And I couldn't really find any information about whether like if they had contact, like obviously they must have spoken to like the owner of the shed or like the business owner, and obviously didn't know who the little girl was or anything like that. So just a very weird kind of like an unanswered question that came out of this case of the early investigation. There was a huge manhunt for Asha that in the week after her disappearance, and after nearly a week and 9,000 man hours that had gone into the search, there were no other clues besides the items in the shed that were found, and the manhunt was eventually called off. And that was only about a week after she had gone missing. So after this, the case actually ended up going cold for nearly 18 months. But then a major development came on August 3rd, 2001 at a construction site. And it was approximately 30 miles from Shelby, which was her town, where her home was. A worker at the construction site came across a book bag that was like buried. So he was like, excavating the area, and buried was a book bag wrapped in some plastic bags. And the book bag had Asha's name and phone number on it. So because it had been 18 months since her disappearance, and the media coverage kind of stopped by then, and it was kind of only local coverage at first. Like, it didn't really gain any national attention. So the worker didn't really think anything of it at first. Like, he didn't connect it immediately with the case of this missing 9-year-old. However, he was like telling his wife about this discovery like later that night or the next day, and she had actually remembered something about the case, or she read about it or knew about the little girl. So she actually demanded that they call the police because of this, because like she knew that it was connected. Obviously it had the name of this girl. The backpack was turned over to the authorities and forensic testing was done on the backpack, but the results of that forensic analysis was never released to the public. So we don't know like if there was fingerprints on it, whose fingerprints it was, or anything. Like, we don't know if there was any, or if there was, whose it was. So that's still kind of being kept from the public for whatever reason. However, the items that were found inside the backpack were eventually released, but they actually didn't release the contents of the backpack until 17 years after it was found. So they didn't even release that until 2018, which is crazy because it could have been like vital information. So I don't know what made them not release it. But anyway, the book bag had a Dr. Seuss book, McElligot's Pool, and a New Kids on the Block t-shirt. Those are like the two items that were inside. The FBI revealed that neither of the items belonged to Asha, although the book was checked out from the library at Asha's elementary school in early 2000, so around the time that Asha went missing. But it wasn't a book that her parents said that she had owned or was in the home or anything, and obviously the New Kids on the Block t-shirt was not hers either. So the FBI released the contents of the bag in hopes of bringing new light and possible clues to the investigation after several years. So I don't really know why they wouldn't have released that in 2001. Also, I did read an article.
Did they
so
look
there was
into who checked that book out?
I couldn't find any. I don't think they did. All I knew it came from that library at her school, but there was no information about like who it, or maybe it's something that they're keeping close to the vest if they're trying to like, you know how sometimes like in other cases we talked about like there's information they know that they don't release just to like if they have a suspect in mind, they don't want all this public information to be out there. But I feel like that would be an obvious place to start if they could like track who signed that book out. That would have been a good investigation point to start. So there's a lot of articles about this case from the Shelby Star, which was like a local newspaper of obviously the Shelby, the town, and like a lot of the articles that I looked at came directly from their newspaper or from like their online articles. And there was an article that said like the forensic testing was going to be done initially, but the bag was found in August of 2001, and then like it was sent to like this big lab in like one of the major cities for forensic testing, and then the September 11th attacks happened a month after, and then they got like an influx of all of these like demands for forensic testing for like that, probably like identifying bodies and stuff like in that attack. So then it kind of pushed this, you know, case of this small town missing girl like to the wayside, and it didn't even get tested for like many months or something. That's something I did read, so it's very probable that it got pushed back.
That's frustrating. Like I know 9/11 obviously was a huge thing, but that doesn't like take away from the fact that this like little girl's life was at stake, or they could find out who it was. I don't know. I find that really sad that happened.
Yeah, and it's just like horrible timing. I mean, not that it's ever good timing for that, but it's like just another unfortunate fact was that it was a month before 9/11, which took precedence over like everything, obviously. So that didn't help. But eventually it was tested for forensic testing, and like I said, it never revealed what that testing like came out with, which leads me to believe that there was like valuable evidence on there, because if there was nothing, why wouldn't they just come out and say there was nothing? Like the fact that they wouldn't release it makes me think that there was like fingerprints or something on it.
Is there a reason why they always keep certain evidence like a secret, like DNA evidence, stuff like that? Is there like a reason behind that? Is like, I just find it weird that they always keep what people want to know to themselves. Well,
remember like when we did the Carissa Boudreaux case a while back, like there was a bunch of information that they knew that the public didn't know because the person who did it would know those specific details. So if they release every little detail, then it kind of taints. Like if somebody comes forward with like little minute details that were just out there, then like it's easy to know it cannot be credible. But if someone comes forward with information that's like no one would know unless you actually know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah.
And sometimes people, for whatever reason, like falsely confess to things, but they don't know the actual little details that the police know, so they couldn't have done it. So they use it in that sense to make sure they actually do have the right person.
Yeah. So like it's very helpful in the investigation. Like if someone comes forward randomly and says like, I know this like small little thing that no one else could possibly know, then obviously they're gonna like be more inclined to follow up with that lead versus
or if they're like interrogating somebody and somebody like lets something slip that nobody would know because it wasn't out in the public, only the person that like did it or was there would know, then they're like, okay, this person definitely did it or was there. Yeah,
exactly. And like it's just like crazy, like they finally released in 2018 like that the book and the t-shirt were inside the backpack, but you know what propelled them to release that in 2018? Like maybe they just figured like, okay, we need more information out there so like people might know something. I don't know, but it's just crazy to think that it was 17 years after. And it's also just very odd. Like, and then people were, you know, obviously makes you think that there was some sort of foul play involved, because like Asia herself's not just going to go on her own, just bury this backpack. Why would you like, it's just very risky to
why wrap it in plastic
bury
for one thing?
A backpack with someone's name on it. Yeah.
And wrapping it in plastic is almost like preserving evidence. If you want to destroy it, like don't wrap it like that.
Yeah, that's true. It like has the name and the phone number of like this missing girl. Like that's just like It's like a very valuable piece of evidence that you think that someone would want to like actually make sure is destroyed, not buried in some plastic bags.
Maybe there was foul play and they don't know, but I feel like, yeah, a case of why wrap it so nice and neatly in a plastic bag? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Or maybe it was like a total complete like red herring, like they did it to throw people off. And if someone found it, they would be totally confused and like go in a direction that they really shouldn't.
Yeah, but it just makes you think too, like, was it placed there shortly before it was found? Or was it like placed there right after she had gone missing and it had just been there for a year and a half before someone found it? It's just like weird to me. Like, so I feel like with every case I always go on like the theory, like the Reddit forums to see like the theories that are swirling out there. And like one of the theories was that somebody had kind of like had been grooming her over for a couple of years or something, and it was like this person that she had grown close to who had like told her to leave on this specific night and like meet them at this random place. I don't know, which is like possible. I feel like that's probably has happened before, obviously, but it just seems like weird. It's like a stormy night. Like, what would propel her to go out unless it was somebody like telling her to meet? I don't know.
That was my first thought too. Like when you were talking about this story and I was like remembering it, that's exactly what I was thinking happened as well. And like this is like she was super excited or I don't know, scared not to meet this person. So even though it was really stormy, she was going to do it anyway. And that's why she like packed her little bag with some of her stuff in it. So it does feel like she was going to go meet somebody.
I feel like what 9-year-old is going to meet somebody in the middle of the night?
Well, like if it was like this like random... Well, if it was like this random like older adult that's like grooming her, who like she's excited to go meet, like if she's someone who she's known for a couple of years, like she's not like a stranger to her. It's like, okay, like on this night you're gonna leave, and you have to leave in the middle of the night because otherwise your parents will know. I don't know, but like obviously, like if the doors were locked in the house, like she left. Like she locked the doors, like she walked out on her own. She packed her bag. She like took her favorite outfits with her and took her house key, and obviously took like the candy that was given to her at the basketball game. Like just very, I don't know. Like it's just very weird. And also in there was a video actually on a YouTube channel of, it's like an ex-police officer who actually has a YouTube channel where she talks about like true crime cases, but she kind of has like a perspective of like, you know, law enforcement. And in that video, she mentioned that because Asia was in the 4th grade, she said that the book that they had recently read in class, it was like a book about someone leaving and going on an adventure. So it was like kind of weird timing that like she would maybe like inspired her to like go out on this weird adventure. But obviously it had to be something more than that. Because it's just like
maybe
odd.
She was like gonna, maybe she had like friends that maybe like a couple or a group or just two of them were talking about it and they were going to plan to meet up, but nobody else actually made it out. Maybe she was the only one that was able to sneak out of her house.
So she sneaks out and then like she runs into the woods when this like motorist is like driving by a few times who's kind of like concerned, and then they find like the candy wrappers and her hair ties and stuff like in the shed. So like, did she go into this shed randomly?
Yeah, maybe because it was like super stormy. Maybe she went in there.
But like also, who is this other person in this picture that's not related to Asia in any way? Like it's just weird to me. I don't know.
It's super weird. I can just like picture the situation, like me being her and like pitch dark in the middle of the night, stormy, rainy, wet, and you're like scared, so you're running through the woods and you come to this creepy shed. Like it's just it's like almost out of a movie. It's creepy.
I know, like it doesn't seem like it could be real. And then there was like also theories that maybe someone had planted the candy wrappers in the shed, because it just seemed weird. But they said maybe that someone had planted it there to like try to throw investigators off or something. But it's just like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that she could have gone into the shed. Like she's obviously fearless if she's like walking into a storm and then at 4 a.m. walking down the highway. Like obviously she doesn't have a lot of fears. So although I read in one of the articles as well that she was terribly afraid of dogs. So it's like her one fear, which doesn't really relate to the case, but obviously she didn't have many fears besides dogs, I guess. Did you guys have any other thoughts before I continue on? Or
I just have goosebumps just thinking like what case. I could like literally vividly picture the situation of her running.
I know, like it's so
creepy.
Like it's like when I was reading this case for the first time, it's like so creepy and weird and crazy and
that case, like that picture, that picture is really weird. Like why would a random picture of someone randomly be there? Like somebody else had to be in that shed, or somebody else had to have a picture of that somebody, like some creeper or something. I don't know. It's creepy.
And that's the thing is, like I said, like in the newest update videos that the FBI has been putting out, they don't mention anything about that picture. Like all the stuff about the picture is all older articles. So I don't know if that, maybe they did identify who it was and it was just completely unrelated. Or it's someone who is related and they're just not putting that out there because it's like that type of information they'd want to keep secret. So I don't know. But it's very strange. It's very odd. Like just a 9-year-old walking out of her house 4 a.m. on a stormy night is just strange in and of itself, and I never really heard any case like that. A 2015 investigation also brought forward a new potential lead in the case, and in 2016 this new information was officially released to the public. According to the FBI's webpage on the case, Asha may have been seen getting into a car that was described as a 1970s model Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird that had rust along the wheel wells. So the FBI also provided pictures of the model on their website. So I'll put that up on the Instagram page as well. But there was no other information about like who came forward with this information, why they came forward with it so late, like what made someone just randomly come forward. But obviously it was credible enough where they released the pictures on the FBI's website, and they believed that she could have been picked up in a car that matched that description. But nothing else about like who could have been driving it or anything else specific besides like the actual model that is similar to that, and rust along the wheel wells. Like I think that's a very inspecific type of information. I mean, like probably half the fucking cars in the world have rust along the wheel wells. I don't know. There's currently a $45,000 reward for any information that leads to her whereabouts. $25,000 is from the FBI itself, and then that's on top of a $20,000 reward that was from the local sheriff's office. So the total is $45,000. There's also like billboards up along the highway and like in the community where she was last seen. So it's still very much ongoing. The latest development in the case actually came only a few months ago in November of 2020. And this is when an inmate named Marcus Mellon wrote a letter to the Shelby Star, which was that local newspaper in the area that I mentioned before. He claimed that he knew exactly what happened to Asha, saying that she was killed, and he knew who did it and where to find her. He also asked that the information be passed on to the FBI. And this is what the letter said. So I do have like the actual, it's like a short paragraph, but it says, so the letter he sent to them said, Asha Degree has been missing for over 20 years. About 4 months ago, I had found out her whereabouts and what had happened to her. She was killed and then took and buried. I do know how and what town she is in. I hope you get this letter and do come see me. It's on the up and up. So Mellon is currently in prison, serving a 14-year sentence at Alexandria Correctional Institute. He's incarcerated for crimes against children. So the FBI did follow up on this lead, and they plan to meet with Mellon in prison, because obviously this is a very intriguing piece of information. They wanted to follow up with it. But a COVID-19 outbreak at the prison delayed that meeting. And to my knowledge, their meeting has not yet happened. And like I said, a good recap of the case that was done by Caroline Mitchell on YouTube, which was the ex-police investigator that I mentioned who has a YouTube channel. She says that although, because the obvious question is like, why wouldn't they just do a meeting on Skype or like see him on Zoom, like if they can't actually physically go there? And she says that although a meeting via Zoom with the inmate could be coordinated and obviously could be done, the police would greatly benefit from meeting in person with Mellon, as body language and in-person interaction is far superior for investigative purposes. So it's much better to actually see him in person, see how his body language. They can kind of tell maybe if he's lying, whatever, like anything like that. She does also mention that inmates commonly do have ulterior motives when they claim to know things about cold cases. You know, he could be bargaining for better treatment in prison or for like a plea deal on his current sentence or something like that, or a series of other motives for these claims by Mellon. So they have yet to be verified. And like I said, as far as I know, the meeting with the FBI hasn't actually happened with him, but it's probably going to be coming up soon. Like I said, that was just in November. So it's only been, or in May now, but you know, it's been like 5-6 months ago. So it's still very new. And maybe once COVID kind of settles down, they'll be able to actually go to the prison and meet with him and see what he has to say.
That's crazy. So is this guy claiming that he did it, or that he knows what happened, or like both?
Yeah, so he's actually claiming that he didn't do it. He just knows what happened, because he says in the letter that about 4 months ago, I had found out her whereabouts and what had happened to her. So he had found out somehow. Someone told him. Obviously, someone had to have told him that they did it, or they know who did it. He said he knows what town she's in. He knows how she was killed and where she can be found. So obviously very intriguing and obviously something that the FBI would want to follow up on. But as of now, it hasn't actually been followed up on.
I get that he, like, because of COVID, he can't do stuff, but like I feel like just do a Skype interview and then later on maybe do an actual interview, like just so you have just so you can get information and like get further into the case. Like I don't know why they're waiting. I get why they're waiting because of COVID.
And I mean, maybe
COVID ruins everything.
Couldn't they like get him to like ask him some questions that he should know if he knew what was happening, and then see if he actually knows the answers to those to see if he's legit, and if not, then don't even bother.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe they are, and like I said, they're just keeping it close until it leads to something. Like maybe he did tell them some information, and they're like following up on those leads, and then they're waiting until they actually have like a breakthrough in the case for him to, and then they'll release like what came of it. But I just know that like the last thing that's been publicly put out there was that he wrote this letter, so maybe that has gone further. I just don't know about it.
It's hard for me to believe that she could be still alive, because you know how like they always say like the first 48 hours is crucial because you never know. Like it's been like 21 years since she's been missing.
Yeah, I think it's actually really rare for someone to be like missing for that long and then to be found alive. So yeah, it's likely that she won't be found alive, sadly.
Yeah. However, Asha's parents have remained hopeful throughout the years. They do believe that Asha is still alive and that someone is still out there who knows where she is and what happened to her. Asha Degree gave an interview to the Jet back in 2013 where she talks about the case. She talks about never giving up hope, and there's also another interview she does give to like a local news channel, but when they say that the missing and the not knowing is worse than if she had it's worse this way than if they had just found the body and then they know like what happened to her, they have closure, they can move on. But having that little bit of hope that maybe she is out there because there is no closure, they don't have a body, they don't know what happened, so that's even worse, because they can't mourn but they can't get over it or move on, or right, because they're still in like that limbo. So she does talk about that, but she also, in the Jet interview, it's very interesting because she does talk about the disconnect between coverage that's given to the cases of missing white people and the cases of missing black women. So Asha, she was African American, and Aquila says, given her experience of only being given local coverage for most of the time of the investigation, I think the fact that I hadn't heard about this case, despite its strange circumstances and very active FBI investigation, like all of the circumstances of this case are so odd and eerie. Like, how has nobody done a documentary on this case yet? There's like, this should have been like a Netflix documentary case or something, or it should have been like one of those high profile ones that is just like such a mystery. But I feel like beyond the local coverage,
I know those like unsolved mystery shows, how they have multiple episodes, right? Like this definitely would qualify for that, because it's just it is a really crazy case.
It's like so crazy, and like, all the unanswered questions, all the strange evidence that they found, and it's just like so perplexing that like it has, this mysterious element that I feel like they would want to turn into a documentary or like something, or like, but she does talk a lot about the fact that a lot of the big unsolved cases or the big national cases, it's always white people, white victims. So because of the fact that they are a black family, Asha was, a 9-year-old black girl. She thinks that definitely played into the fact where people just didn't care. The police didn't, weren't as active in the investigation at first. So that definitely could have played a huge role into it. So could there possibly be racism at play here? And like I said, has there not been a documentary series or something about this case? So like the fact that when you Google her name, most of the stuff that comes up is from like the local Shelby Star article, or maybe like a podcast episode here and there that's done a episode on it, but like it's not like this major. I think the biggest source I could find was like there was an ABC News article from 2010 that talked about like coming up on the 10-year anniversary, and they did like a video and an interview with the family. But other than that, like, this is a crazy case that's still unsolved. Like, how is there not more coverage of it? She did go on like a talk show, it was the Montel Williams show, and I think in America's Most Wanted did do an episode on it early on, and then I think she says that Oprah mentioned it like in a small mention of the case in one of her episodes or something, but it was not a huge case that, like the big ones that you hear about all the time. So, and when you do think about all those big cases, like most of them, it's true, it is like white people and white victims. So that definitely could be a very much active part in it that she's very much aware of. But I think she's also just so grateful for any coverage of it at all, and like anything that she can do to get it out there. But she's still aware that it's not really up to par with the coverage of other similar cases. So her parents...
Yeah, it's definitely sad that that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
I feel like that probably does have a part to play in it not being widespread. I mean, I search for like unsolved missing persons, and like it doesn't show up on any list that I've seen. Well, it does actually.
I know.
Like,
I mean,
but not like the huge ones. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, yeah.
Like, I remember actually, I think I looked up, like, I was looking for cases to cover, and I looked up, like, strangest unsolved cases. And, like, there was, like, a bunch of, like, top 10 lists and stuff. And, like, this was on one of those lists, like way down in the Google search. So, like, I did stumble upon it that way. But it's not, like, I don't know. I feel like there's just so many other cases that have become, like, mainstream that everyone knows about, like Casey Anthony case, the Jodi Arias case, the Chris Watts case where he killed his whole family. Like, these are all white people, white victims.
Adrian Yates.
Yeah, exactly.
They're all white people. You've noticed?
Yeah, and like the John Bonet Ramsey case, like that's an unsolved case. That's like everyone knows about.
Yeah.
It's like a huge case. What was that other one? The one from Portugal, the Madeline, the missing child, Madeline.
Oh, the Madeline McCann.
Forget. Yeah, Madeline McCann, like that's a white family as well. Like, did you notice a trend in all of these like huge cases? Yeah,
yeah.
And like, there's documentaries on that one, and like the John Bonet Ramsey case. Like, it seems like every year they're coming out with a documentary on that one. And that one's like still like that one is obviously not similar to this one, but like in terms of it being still such an unsolved case, like so strange, so bizarre, and unsolved. Like, what differentiates those two?
Well, maybe this case will get maybe somebody will hear this case and be like, maybe we'll be that podcaster that helps solve the crime for this family.
Could you imagine?
Somebody hears it and they know something about the case and they know that person. And
yeah. And like, you never know. It's just like so bizarre.
Since there's nothing out there, like, who knows, like this, like we could do a podcast and somebody from like that area could be listening to this podcast and be like, oh my gosh, and then like, you never know. We could be that voice. Yeah,
so the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they did release age progression photos of her. She would actually be 30 this year, turning 30, because she was 9 at the time that she disappeared, and it's been 21 years. February 14th would have been 21 years, so she would have turned 30 this past February. So they have released, I believe 2020 was the last age progression photo they released of her as a 29-year-old, because she would have been 29 at that time. So we're going to put that on the Instagram page or all our social medias as well. So if she is still out there, she would be 30 years old. So you never know. It is very, very possible. And yeah, like, it's just such a bizarre case. Like, just even the evidence that they have found is just so weird. Like, all that stuff in the shed and like that random picture of that other missing girl, and then the backpack with like the children's book and the t-shirt in it. Like, those are really random. And like the fact that that's like the last piece of like credible evidence was like that evidence they found buried.
Yeah, it's so weird when there's like little evidence, but like nothing fits in or like adds up to anything substantial. It's frustrating and it's really, really weird.
They did like a whole, obviously during the manhunt and everything, and after they found like the stuff in the shed, like they did a whole manhunt and like a huge search of the area, like the whole, and then after they found the book bag and all that stuff, I'm sure they did a whole search of the area then too. So it's like they had done these searches, they found nothing. So, and if she did get into that like Ford Thunderbird car that like they revealed pictures of, like whoever was driving that car like could have taken her and driven her who knows where. So she could have been like across the country for all we know. And it's just like so bizarre. Like, just even like from the beginning, like she walks out in the middle of the night in a storm. Like, that just doesn't happen ever, I feel.
I just find it hard to believe that she walked out without anybody telling her to. I don't feel like a 9-year-old would just get up and walk out of the house, especially if it's storming outside. Like, for me, unless she had like somewhere planned to be, she had to meet someone, because otherwise like that's a random night to just pick. Like, if it was storming outside, like thunder and lightning, like you wouldn't see me outside in a storm. I hate thunder and lightnings, like especially at that age. I just find it hard to believe that she's by herself.
Yeah, she was really determined to like do whatever she was doing or get wherever she was gonna go.
Yeah, and like, you know, her brother said that he heard like her bed squeaking at some point in the night, so like that was probably her getting up, and like she packed her bag because like I don't think they have any reason to believe the bag was packed before she went to sleep. So she woke up in the middle of the night, packed the bag with like her favorite clothes in it, and just like went on an adventure, I guess. I don't know, it's so weird, and like locked the door behind her, and like it's just so
Do you think
weird.
like a theory could be that she was so disappointed because she lost the basketball game that she wanted to go back and try to like practice her basketball skills somewhere else? You know what I mean? Like at the school?
Well, that's the thing. It's actually, that's actually a good point, because the route that she was walking along the highway is apparently like the same route that her bus would take. Like that was her bus route. I forgot to mention that earlier, but yeah. So like, if that is possible, she was like walking to the school. She wanted to like do, I don't know. Because you know how like kids can sometimes get hung up on like small things. So maybe she was just so frustrated and pissed about this game. She wanted to like improve her skills like in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. during a storm. I don't know.
That's what this kid, like, that just popped into my mind, like, just 2 seconds ago. I was like, well, maybe she was trying to go, like, try to come up with, like, practice her basketball skills because she was so disappointed that she lost the game. Like, and now that you say that it was on the bus route, that theory kind of makes sense, but obviously it's not.
And like, maybe it was somebody from the school, like it was an adult who worked at the school. Something was like invited her to come like to practice her game at like at the school, and like that's why the book bag had like that children's book in it that was signed out from the school library. Like, I don't know. Obviously it was somebody, I don't know. It's just
maybe it was her
so
coach.
Weird. I have so many questions that I can't even like fathom.
I mean, if she wanted to go practice basketball, not tell her parents, or like, but why do it at 4 a.m.? That's what I don't understand. If you're gonna go practice basketball, why do it so late at night?
Because then no one could stop her. Like if it was during the day, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, maybe she packed a bag so she'd she just get changed at school and then just be at school the next morning.
Well, yeah, actually, in that YouTube video I watched from Caroline Mitchell, like the ex-police investigator, she mentions in that video, and I actually haven't been able to find this information in other articles. Maybe it is out there. I just haven't dug deep enough into that. I don't know, but she says in that video that she did pack her basketball uniform. Allegedly, that was taken from the home. So if that fits into that theory somehow.
Oh, maybe it could have been someone that was like, oh, come and let's practice your basketball so that you don't lose again. And so that's where
it's just like going. So creepy to me. Ugh.
But if that was the case, then where is she 21 years later?
Well, it could have just been like a ruse. Like,
but yeah, that was just them.
Maybe
that was just a story to get her to go. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
No, like reasonable adults can be like, let's go practice basketball at 4 a.m. But don't tell your parents. Like that's.
Yeah,
that,
unless like it fits into the theory of like somebody who had been grooming her for years before that, or like, you know, it's somebody that she came to know and someone she came to trust who maybe like could have been a friend of like the family or someone who worked. I don't know.
Could have been the coach, allegedly.
Allegedly, you can't say.
It's not allegedly because no one ever said that.
Oh yeah, so we don't have to say allegedly.
Yeah, like allegedly, it's just that someone was like accused of it or something.
Oh yeah,
right? Or like.
Well, by us.
Yeah, like charged.
Oh. Okay. So if we're just saying a theory,
not convicted.
Yeah.
Well, you can still say allegedly, but like it doesn't really make sense.
I mean, it could have been. I mean, like it could have been someone from the school. Like, I want to know who signed out that Dr. Seuss book. Like,
I find it hard they didn't know who that was though.
Well, maybe they do. They just didn't release who it was.
I guess because back then you have to put your name down to sign out a book.
Yeah, but how many years was this later, right? Like, they still have that record of who signed it out?
Well, they found it a year and a half later.
Oh, it was a year and a half later.
It was August 2001.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like 18 months after.
You should still know.
It's like, it is possible. But, like, isn't it like that was back in the days when you had to, like, handwrite, like, the date it was going to be brought back or something? I don't know.
Yeah, but the librarian probably had, like, a hard copy, like, good record of it somewhere, too. Or even, like, an electronic record.
But maybe, like, that didn't, like, pan out, that lead. Because obviously that would have been their first inkling, is to like check out who signed out that book, and the fact that it was never released who did, then maybe it was like not relevant. But how can it not be relevant? All I know is it was signed out from her library at her school.
Was there any like security cameras at the school? Like, did anybody see anybody come in and out? Or if you went to the school, I'm not saying
that I could find.
School, but
Not that I could find. There's nothing about any security footage. Like, her last known sighting was that she ran into the woods after that motorist was like circling around a couple times. Like,
So I wonder why she ran into the woods. She's scared? Like, why she would run in the woods?
Well, she ran probably because she saw this like car. I mean, she's not scared enough to walk out into a storm at 4 a.m, but she's scared that a car is like circling. I don't know. The fact that
what makes you think it must have been someone that she really trusted, right? Because if she was scared of this random person pulling over to talk to her, then she wouldn't have just gone out into the storm for anyone, right? It had to be someone she really trusted.
Yeah, and like, obviously, if this person didn't want to be like seen like pulling up into the driveway or something, I was like, why didn't that person just pick her up at her house and say he was going to drive her to the, you know what I mean? Made her walk in a storm, but obviously he didn't want to be caught.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But you're also at risk, like, her walking and somebody seeing like someone did see this 9-year-old girl walking on the highway. Like, that's even more weird than either you obviously you don't want to show up at your house and like someone notice you, but I also find it weird that he thinks that just her walking on the side of the road, it wouldn't be suspicious at all.
That's true. But also I found it weird, like, nobody actually called the police initially. Like, these motorists didn't call the police when they saw this child walking. They only came forward like after, I think it was like shortly after, when it was news had gotten out that there was this missing girl, then they said that they had seen her at that time. So nobody called the police initially, which was kind of weird.
I would have called the police right away.
But yeah, it was just...
Well, did they know it was a kid at first? Like, it was really stormy. Maybe they just saw a person and they thought maybe, it's just somebody, an adult out for a walk or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually... Fishermen. They had said that they had seen somebody... Like, they had seen person. They said they couldn't be for sure that it was a child or not, but they said it was like a small person. But it could have been just like a shorter person. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a child. And yeah, it was stormy. Visibility's not great. So it's just like super weird. Also, something else that I did forget to mention as well, just like an interesting piece of information, was like the kids were quite sheltered. Like, in interviews with her mom and her dad after, they said that the family didn't even own a computer. I mean, it was only 2000, but they said they still didn't have a home computer because she was trying to like shield the kids from the dangers of the outside world. She said every time that you would turn on the TV, there would be like news of like a sex offender in the area or someone who was apprehended. So that was something that was very much on the family's radar. So that's like pretty gross and creepy. But so like, it's not like not that a 9-year-old would like get on the internet and like talk to this random stranger online, but like for someone to do, like, you go through all this to shelter your child from all the dangers, and then it still happens. Because to show you if like it was someone who was close to her, someone who was close to the family, who knew her, it's just so creepy.
Yeah, maybe because she was so sheltered, like she really wasn't paying as much attention to this person that she knew. Like, what am I trying to say? Like, maybe because she was so sheltered, she didn't realize she could be in danger with this person.
There.
Yeah, and like this person that maybe she shouldn't have trusted, but she did. But yeah.
Like, if she was seeing all of this stuff every day on the news about all of these, even though you're 9, you might not really comprehend it. But if you're seeing like these people arrested, sex offenders here, like all these, and your parents are saying like, don't talk to strangers, like that might be more. If she was seeing that all the time, then it might have prepared her more to not talk to strangers. But if this person wasn't a stranger, though, that's the thing. Like, could have been very much someone that she knew for a while. So it's not like she was going to meet this stranger. It was this person that she trusted.
Yeah. And like, I'm sure her parents, taught all their kids, watch out for people, don't talk to strangers. And that was just another, thing that they were doing to protect them, was to keep them off the internet, which I say kudos to that, because that's not easy. But yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, although in 2000,
somebody else just got in there. That's true. But yeah, I mean, but all kids would be excited about the internet and like just to be able to keep your kids off the computer, just not get a computer maybe. But yeah.
Yeah. It's like, anyway, just a very bizarre case. And I'm really intrigued. I mean, I'm intrigued by everything in this case, but I think I'm really intrigued too because the most recent development, like, it's not like the last known thing has been like 15 years ago and it's like very unlikely we'll get updates. It's like, no, there's been a development as of November 2020 that is still being followed up on. So it's like any day, you never know, we could get like a break in the case. Like, maybe it will pan out and that person in prison who wrote that letter does know something, and maybe it will lead to closure. Obviously, it's unfortunate if like what he says is true and she was killed, but at least then the family could get closure. Or if she's still out there alive, Who knows? Which is what the family is still very much believing. Like they have to have faith at this point, because you can't, until you get closure, you can't really close that chapter. But it's just really sad and bizarre and weird. But anyone with information about this case, no matter how small it may seem, is urged to call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822 or submit a tip on the Cleveland County Sheriff app. Or you're urged to contact the FBI Charlotte office by calling 704-672-6100. So do you guys have any other final thoughts?
I hope the family can get closure soon.
Yeah, same. I hope it gets resolved and there can finally be some closure for this family.
Yeah, me too. That's the goal. And we'll obviously update you the minute that we hear anything. We'll update all our social medias. We'll probably do an update, like, just keep you posted on the episodes as the developments come up. But yeah, so that's the case of Asha Degree. So if you've liked this episode and you want to follow us on all the social medias, you can find us on Instagram at Crime Family Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Crime Family Pod 1. And we are also on Facebook at Crime Family Podcast. And we have an email, crimefamilypodcast@gmail.com. So you can send us all of your suggestions, feedback, good, bad, the ugly, anything in between. And also, please give us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts if that's how you listen, or if your streaming service that you listen to us on has the ability to leave a review. We would very much like you to leave us a review, because that's what other people go on when they start to listen to a podcast, maybe. And all information and feedback is valuable to us. So please give us a review if you can. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.